Hey everyone, welcome to Alumless. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in on this Friday. I am Ryan Catherwood. That, of course, sharing the screen with me is CEO founder Chris Marshall. Alumless is a CMAC production, and on the show we talk about engagement strategies and higher ed advancement most of the time. Sometimes we digress into all sorts of different directions, but most of the time we stay on topic. We are not live today. We try to be live most of the time. We've pre-recorded this episode, so I can go on vacation, actually. We'll be publishing this while I am returning from St. Bart's from a week with the missus, which I've been looking forward to a long time. So, but I'm sure there will be a vibrant conversation going on in the LinkedIn event, and I'm excited for the show because we have one of our favorite people on to chat advancement with us in Carla Willis. Chris, how you doing today? You doing all right?
Doing good. This is a dangerous week before you leave because I'm nervous. I'll be all by myself for a week. So
I'm glad you think that highly of me to help keep things going. But yeah, we've got 4 days this week. I'm on a bit of a countdown, but excited about it.
I believe it. Good for you.
Yeah.
Though. Taking vacation is a good thing to do. Unplug. It's important.
Yeah, well, before we get too far into the show, I want to make sure to introduce our fantastic sponsoring partner, Protopia. We as engagement pros are always thinking about how to create more volunteer opportunities because volunteers give at 2 and 3 times their rate, and it's just a great thing to do. This is important, particularly for alumni leaders working in integrated advancement models. We're trying to create a pipeline of donors through volunteerism. At the same time, on campus, students throughout the educational journey have questions and could use advice from alumni. As engagement pros, we're asked to figure out ways to make the alumni network more available from prospective student to former student and develop partnerships across campus that will showcase in real terms how valuable the alumni network can be. So that's what Protopia solves for. Without requiring alumni or students to sign up for another app or platform, Protopia's AI-powered technology activates alumni and turns them into volunteers in a flash. Students and alumni seeking advice are connected while removing the administrative burden of staff. Excuse me. Protopia is a tool you've been looking for. Visit protopia.co/alumless. And yeah, you should absolutely check it out. Every time I have a conversation with Max and the Protopia team, I am awed by the potential of the technology and the way that it's already helped customers like LSE and Denison really just scale up engagement. So we're grateful to have them on board. But Chris, we're going to have a great conversation with Carla Willis, our colleague from Washburn McGoldrick. And we'll do our Friday cheers section at the end of the podcast. But I thought we could just kind of get down to brass tacks a little bit in the beginning of the episode and ask you, what's the most difficult part about being a consultant? I want to talk a little consultant talk to get the show going.
I get people ask me often about moving into consultant roles and what's that like, and my the most difficult aspect of it, in one word, it's balance. I mean, there's balancing work and personal life. You have to be able to do that well, and you could get consumed by this if you're not careful and not have any personal life. I worry about that sometimes for both of us. There's also balance in the sense of the work you're currently doing, you have to stay focused on, but at the same time, you have to balance the next round of work that you want to get to do later on. So there's this constant struggle between delivering and selling work. And then the other balance piece, I'll tell you this is that, and I've been focused a lot more on this lately, and you've been helpful with me on this, is there's a balance between working in your business and working on your business. It's just a subtle little thing. It's literally one letter in those those words, but it means a whole difference in what your company's going to look like in the long term. And I've spent too much time in the business, and I'm trying to be more disciplined about working on the business.
Well, it's a delicate thing when it's Chris Marshall advancement consulting, exactly. Right? I mean, the folks that hire Chris Marshall want to, have you involved in the projects, and it's also the business too, which you hope to expand and do some cool things. And so it makes sense that it's kind of hard to pick, where to spend time, but almost always you're going to gravitate towards the clients, right? And what they need, not the business itself. So
yeah, but you and I were together in Denver last week, and And I'm sitting there listening to you deliver this, and it occurred to me, and I said this to you when we left. I wrote it to you in your note afterwards. It occurred to me that you don't need me there. You could do these kind of things without me, and I just got to let that happen and be better about not feeling I got to be present all the time. And I have people who are good who can do this without me there. So that's part of it.
Well, 2 years in, if it's fair to say that, like, you could confidently say to a client that, hey, listen, I can't be there. I'm going to send Ryan. You're not going to miss a beat. Like, that means I've,
Right.
done well.
I would add to that sentence, you're going to be better off with Ryan.
Oh, well, maybe going a little too far, but I appreciate that. I think we make a good team going out and working with folks. And I really enjoyed the alumni council engagement we had with the University of Denver last week. It was really fun.
Yep.
But when I was transitioning, Chris, from my campus job and thinking about consulting, you and I spoke a couple of times. What advice do you remember giving me about what it takes to be successful as a consultant? And would you alter or change that advice now that I've been working with you the last couple of years? We're going to ask Carla this same question. We're going to bring her out next. But Jamie, just sort of like summarize that advice you provided me, and like, would you amend it at all?
Yeah, I'm almost certain I told you need 3 things to be a successful consultant. And if I didn't tell you this, I should have, but I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah.
Number 1, you need experience in the field, just doing the work, right? You just need time under your feet, and having experience and running a shop, for example, is really important. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to have a network. You need to have built a network of people. You need to be as much as possible, a known entity in the field, or have enough people who know you, who can refer you. And then I think a lot of people come to the field with those 2 things. They're hard, but you see a lot of people. Where I see people fail is they don't have the third thing, which is you got to be able to close. You got to be able to sell and close. The old Alec Baldwin speech where he said, "Always be closing." ABC there's some truth in that, and you have to be able to close, and that's hard in this business, especially when you're working with a lot of former colleagues and friends, and to be able to close is difficult. And the people that figure it out, and you figured it out I said about 18 months it was going to take you. You did it in about 6, but you started closing your first deals, and your first big deal was about a year in, but the early ones were quicker than that, but the smaller ones were quicker. The other thing I would add to that advice right now is at some point you need to learn how to say no. And there are certain clients where you say no, not now, or let me have someone else help you do it. Those are the things. And I haven't figured that part out yet. I'm still working on it, but.
Yeah, well, it depends. You don't want to say no because sometimes there are dry spells, right?
Exactly.
And if you say no, and you're like, gosh, I really wish it. But and selling, we'll talk to Carla in just one last second here. Is I think that's the most daunting part, because no one knows whether they can do that until they try that.
Yep.
And one thing you learn really quickly is that you cannot count on any piece of business until it's signed, right? Like, it cannot go on your tracker, your spreadsheet for, what you're going to make until it's actually done. And
I've gotten to the point where it's like a superstition where I don't put it in the underway sign until literally a signature happens. Otherwise it jinxes it, I think.
But you do need to track where people are in a pipeline. Right?
We do that.
We do that well. All right, let's bring out Carla Willis to the conversation. Excited, Carla, to have you join us. Carla, you are the principal at Washburn McGoldrick LLC. Welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Ryan, and with Chris.
Yeah, co-principal, right, with our colleague.
Actually, I was going to correct you. There are actually 2 principals, and then we have 2 owners and managing principals. Right. So 4 principals. I'm one of 4.
One of 4, right? And we've had Bonnie and Karen on the show before, our good colleagues, and we'll get Ann Barry on the show at some point real soon. But great to have you. We do a lot of work together. We do a lot of retreating together, and work with clients through CMAC and the relationship that Chris has established with Washburn McGoldrick over the years. So it's been really fun for me to get to know you through Washburn and McGoldrick, and add you to the show. So welcome. So maybe we can just start sort of with a high level question. How did you get into advancement consulting, and do you specialize in any areas? What projects do you work on?
That's a really great question, Ryan. I'd like to say that I've always taken a consultative approach to work, even when I was a chief advancement officer. And I would say after my fourth chief advancement officer role, I decided I didn't want to serve higher ed in that way anymore. And yet I still wanted to serve and to be able to continue problem solving, which I love doing, and to apply my 30 plus years of experience. And so I reached out to one of our co-managing principals, Karen George, and as they say, the rest is history. After reaching out to her, I decided that it was a path I wanted to take. And it's been great. In our firm, we specialize in helping higher ed as well as independent school clients with comprehensive campaigns ranging from 2.5 million to 2.5 billion. And we do internal advancement assessments of programs within advancement, external feasibility studies to determine if an institution is prepared and ready to conduct a campaign. We provide ongoing counsel to institutions once they're in a campaign. And we do a lot of collaborative thought partnership with our clients as they work to solve some of today's issues that are arising in the higher ed advancement space. And so, long answer to your question, but I hope that's helpful.
I like that term, thought partnership. I think I use that a lot when we're in conversations or sharing information with a potential new client. I think that's really what we do. We're somebody who can get in there and be another brain to work on a problem together, try to help solve it.
Exactly. Because, when you think about it, all of our clients, they're just as smart as we are, right?
Amen.
We're just there to add some extra thinking and some query to help them sometimes draw the conclusions that we would tell them to do as consultants, but rather than telling them, we help them come up with the answers through our queries.
Yeah, 100%. I can't talk Monday morning, but I have a client where I have a thought partnership relationship, and he's in Australia. So I am working, Sunday night or Monday night sometimes. And he's an interim director, right? So he's in a short period of time, and it's really just a great opportunity, I think, during periods of transition. Particularly when new people arrive, when new leadership is there to sort of help keep things moving in the right direction as a thought partner. But Carla, maybe you could answer the question I posed to Chris a little bit earlier, which was advice to other people who are thinking about getting into consulting themselves, right? What have you learned as a consultant? Chris gave me his 3 bits of advice. I think that they were really helpful for me to understand the runway and frame of mind I needed to be thinking about the next few years after I started.
Well, the first thing I'd say before answering the question, I don't know about the two of you, but I'm probably getting a call or an email or text message a week from someone asking about and inquiring about getting into consulting. Yeah. And I heard Chris's answers, and certainly, balance and the network are important. One of the things I try to do is, it's a 2-part question. And the question is, what do you like about what you do now, and what don't you like? And then their answers lead me to the advice that I provide. And I say to them, if you enjoy problem solving, if you enjoy collaborative thought partnership, if you enjoy juggling lots of different balls, and that no 2 days are ever the same, then I encourage them to consider consulting. And I kind of break it down into 3 words to help them hone in on whether it's something for them or not. I said the 3 most important words that you'll be thinking about every day are finding, binding, and grinding. You need to find the opportunities for work and for people to work with and who need your services. You need to bind the arrangement or the contractual thing, and that sometimes takes a while. Like Chris, I never count on anything before it's inked, because it sometimes takes a while. And then it's grinding out and providing the service that you have proposed to provide. So that's kind of how I approach that question.
How do you grind?
Yeah, I love it. It's like the grind part. I feel like also, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about it, how you got started thinking about the activity that you need to do to build your network, right? When you're reaching out to people, you need to introduce yourself. You know that you're not going to arrive at a scenario where the person you're talking to is going to say, "Oh, I have business for you today." Right? You know that you're having a conversation probably about business a year from now or even longer from now. And you're just thinking about that type of activity as, a good investment of your time. How do you guys think about that? And how should someone just starting out think about that? We're off script a little bit, but I feel like it's a good piece of the puzzle to talk about.
Carla, go.
I think it's great. So I said this to someone recently. The work I do now and the way I approach it isn't any different than when I was an advancement officer. We train and we talk to advancement officers about their portfolios, about always doing good discovery work and always trying to uncover that next prospective donor. Well, if you substitute the word client for the word donor, it's no different. You're always doing discovery work. And just as if you were working with a donor, you may want that donor to close that gift this year, but it's always about their timeline of when they're ready to close the gift. The same as it's no different with clients. They approach you, but sometimes it's hurry up and wait. And so you have to really exercise patience and always have a lot of prospective clients in the pipeline, because none of it's going to come together at the same time.
Yep. It's great. That was a fantastic off-script answer, by the way. So I don't even want to attempt it, but I'll add a couple practical things to it. I love everything you said. Building relationships is part of the work we do. That's the binding part that and when you're not in a formal sales conversation, staying in touch with people along the way is really important. Showing up at conferences, being at the Case Summit is my annual thing. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to have 57 meetings when I'm there because I want to see people and check in. But I'll put on my teaser list to call people, email people, check in between every quarter. And then I have a very active LinkedIn presence where I'm constantly checking and liking and following and sending people articles. And so those are the things that keep the buying going when you're not in a sales conversation. And it's a practical piece, but it's important. This show is part of what we do. Not only are you a thought partner as a consultant with a client, you're also a thought leader in providing. We bring on really smart people to make us look good, Carla. So that's why you're here, so that we can provide thought leadership in our industry. And people started to form a habit of watching this show. And I have several clients right now who have hired new people, and they've made it a requirement for them to watch all 37 of our episodes because they think those 37 hours are good baseline training for somebody moving into this role. So all those things add up together.
That's great. And Chris, you touched upon something that's really important that I failed to mention, and that is using LinkedIn as a tool.
Yeah.
I am on LinkedIn every day. I do the things that you shared, but I also look for people who are newly appointed in chief advancement officer roles, people who I know. And I'll reach out and simply congratulate them and suggest to them that when they get grounded, I'll do it in a private message. When they feel grounded in their new role, I'd love to touch base with them to hear how it's going. And then I certainly don't wait for them to connect with me. I put it on a little chart, a little calendar, and I'll reach out to them at about that 3-month point. And often that leads to new business.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's the key is the timing of that. You got to wait till the fire hose dies down a little bit.
Exactly.
3 months, and then you go in and say, hey, what are your pain points? How can we help? It sounds a little bit like only thing about it is that you want to go in and close a deal. It's not. It's a relationship you're going to have with that person. And I tell people all the time, continue to ask if the contract is done, or even if we're not in a contract, keep asking me questions, stay in touch. And I actually joke around and say, I'll tell you when it gets to a point where I think you owe me money. Other than that, just keep talking. I'll tell you when it gets too much.
I guess it's a little bit different. I mean, it is sales work, right? But it's a little different. It's more like major gift officer work than it is about, annual giving calling, right?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
That's a good way to think of it. Yeah.
You know, it's you're definitely not pestering people, right? And in the way that, you know, the phone-a-thon might call 4 times a year, right? When it comes to sort of sales, right? It's a different type of sales work. But
Carl, I want to ask you, I've learned a ton from you, Bonnie, Karen, and others in the firm on the fundraising major gift campaign side of the house. But I also learned from you when we talk about alumni engagement. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you think of alumni engagement in the realm of advancement and how we think about what role alumni engagement plays. What's your first thoughts that come to mind when you think about alumni engagement?
So I would say I have always seen alumni engagement as an essential rung in the advancement ladder. And early on in my career, I was in the minority because it was, separate. Alumni engagement is here. Well, back then, alumni relations is here,
Right.
and fundraising is here. But I've always seen it as connected. And I'm so pleased that we are seeing more and more advancement models where that connection is there, because it's an essential rung. I don't believe an institution can have a sustainably strong advancement program without a strong alumni engagement program that is connected and collaborative.
Yep. When you're providing advice to clients and you see something happening at an institution, what's the trigger that propels you to say, I think you may need to invest in alumni engagement here? Is there something that happens, or a pattern, or does it depend on the client?
I think it's several things, Chris. I think first of all, when I see a low number of alumni engagement staff compared to benchmark peers, when I see low alumni participation rates, and I'll tell you, I hate that word participation, and I'm using it only because it's what we use, have been using, but I'm so glad to see it transitioning to engagement rate. So when I see a low percentage there, when I see an insufficient number of prospective donors who are in discovery and in that category of relationship with the institution, and when I see a major and transformational gift pipeline that isn't large enough to support campaign dollar goals. And then also, I think finally, if I see, and I'm working on a campaign and we're looking at who the potential volunteer leaders might be, and they're the same as the last campaign, because that means there hasn't been any building or development of new relationships with alumni, that's when I suggest applying more resources. So any one or all of those are great. Things.
I'll add 2 more. I loved all your answers. I'll give you 2 more that I look for. And sometimes I look, if I find that there's an absence of these things, it tells me as much. And those 2 things are, you mentioned one of them. When I ask, what's your alumni engagement score or your AEM, the case AEM, and they look at me, or if they can't answer it, they look at me like I'm crazy. Red flags are going off in my head, right?
Yes.
Right. That's a sign right there. And number 2 is I ask for a copy before we do any project. I ask for a copy of your most recent, call it strategic or long-term plan, not what you're doing this year plan, the longer-term plan. And I can tell you, 3/4 of the people I ask for that question don't have one of those. And the quarter that do, they're more annual. Maybe a very small percentage actually have a real strategic plan. But the vast majority say we don't have one. We're going year to year to year. That's a yellow flag for me.
Couldn't agree more. And all the more reason why they need CMAC.
There you go. CMAC and Washburn.
And Washburn. They need us both. Yes.
There's no doubt that there's I can imagine a lot of triggers to say, hey, alumni engagement is an investment worth making. But I imagine one of the biggest glaring red signs is the lack of the major gift pipeline being even close to where, it needs to be to reach some of these big numbers. And, you've got to get individuals engaged along that pipeline and really ramp things up. But what do you think about, Carla? Do you think that's true, or is that a major trigger for sort of recommending alumni engagement work, is not having enough donors in the pipeline? Or do you think there's others that are more important?
Well, I think that's an important one, but I think there are other important ones. I'm one who believes that not every alum is going to move along the continuum to become a major or principal level donor. And yet I still believe engagement of them is important, because sometimes they end up providing great career advice for students, or they get involved and engaged in the university in other ways. So the pathway and the continuum has multiple sort of like stop off points along the continuum that might be the best point of engagement for that particular alum.
Yeah. What do you find advice that you frequently are giving? The two pieces of advice that you find commonly you're offering every advancement leader you work with? Do you see any trends in that area?
Yes, I do. Lately, a lot of the advice centers around HR related matters, and employee engagement related matters. And people are trying to hire, and they're having a difficult time finding top talent. Chris, I don't know if you're seeing that. Every client. And one of the pieces of advice that I have been giving them is to hire a search firm if they're doing like large blocks of hiring, because if you're doing and partnering with your HR department, it takes a lot of time away from the other important work that needs to be done. Certainly the search firm can't take on everything. You still have to be involved in the process of hiring, but getting them to help vet and identify talent, that's one of the main pieces of advice I've been giving. And then the second is helping them feel as though they're not alone. Many of them feel defeated because they've had several failed searches, and helping them understand that the challenges that they're experiencing are challenges across the board right now in the higher ed and independent school space. It's just challenging right now to find top talent.
I think there's no doubt that there's a lot of dynamics going on there. One of which we should talk about at a different episode is the move higher ed's making to have everybody back in person all the time, I think is an interesting one. But there's other reasons for sure. Chris, you and Carla have worked together at Washburn McGoldrick on campaign readiness assessments and feasibility studies. How have those projects helped you become a better consultant?
Like I said earlier, I've learned a ton. I started working with Bonnie 22 years ago when she was the VP at Lehigh, and I was on the alumni leader there, and always have learned from her. I think of Bonnie as a mentor and dear friend, and every time I interact on a project with her, I get a broader and broader view of the advancement space, because I came out in the alumni engagement side. I ran 2 shops for 12 years, 7 at Lehigh, 5 at Cornell. But in both those places, I had leaders, Bonnie and at Lehigh and Charlie Flager at Cornell, who believed and expected and brought me into the program to build an integrated advancement model where alumni engagement plays a role in fundraising. So I've always had that lens, but it gets broad. When we get into a feasibility study or a readiness assessment, I'm getting exposed to things I hadn't seen at that level before, and it makes my work better in all ways. And the last thing I'll say on that is that I think there's a role for alumni engagement at any point along the way. The old notion that a good alumni relations program will get you ready for the next or 2 campaigns from now, I think that's still true, but I think a good alumni program can help right now. You think about the cycle, you think about identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. I think a good alumni program should play a role in absolutely 3 of those 4 things, and maybe not ever solicit for funds, a large gift, but play a role in identifying, cultivating, and stewarding those large donors. That could happen in this campaign, and a good alumni program, I think, should do that. So that's where that lens has been broadened for me to think about those things in a different way. So thank you, Carla.
Adjust the campaign to focus on where they are in relation to the campaign, right?
Exactly.
There is not just one thing, one alumni engagement strategy which should have these different things. It's actually really should be custom designed for philanthropic goals. But Carla, I've got a couple of great questions that we skipped over in this first section that I think we'll add to our bonus section. Since we've reached the top of the
30
show.
minutes, Carla, goes like that.
Goes by really fast.
Wow,
I think
we're done.
Focused a lot more on
minutes.
sort of consulting, and we've got some questions for you about some of the work that you've done. and again, about some of the lessons you've learned. But Chris, just to wrap up our live show for this week, who are we featuring next?
The wonderful, talented, and super smart Kim Infante from Syracuse University. I'm just going to say that. She's wonderful and all that, but there's a special announcement coming with that episode in a week.
Yeah, we have a special edition of Alumless with Kim. Then we'll share a bit more about that. Just do some hinting for now. But Carla, thanks so much for being on the show. We're gonna record another great 30 minutes with you in just a moment. But thanks for listeners for tuning in, making Alumless part of your work week, your staff meetings, your podcast listening habits. We appreciate it, and we really enjoy doing the show to add some thought partnership to the space, because I don't know, we all geek out on this stuff, and I think people who listen to us, I think they do too, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all pretty fun. Wouldn't listen if you weren't also a nerd about this. So all right, well, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Well, actually, yeah, it'll be in 2 weeks, with 1 week actually after we publish this with Kim Infante. All right,
thanks, Carla.